702.
Family Matters.
Why am I rushing to? They're going to say to me, oh, you love relationship topics. It's our Family Matters feature this morning on the Clement show. And I want us to have a conversation about naming children this morning. When do you decide on a child's name? Is it before or after they're born? And what do you consider before choosing a name? Like, do you name them after your favorite celebrity? Do you name them after your great parents, your great parents, right? Choosing your baby's name is an important decision that you make as a parent. Yes, it can be fun, but the responsibility of naming another human being can make it a bit intimidating. I mean, after all, that child is going to carry that name throughout their life, right? You know, some people consider giving a tribute to deceased relatives, right? They want to honor their heritage, their ancestry. You know, some people just want to maintain a brand of initials, like the same initials for everyone in the immediate family. And some just want to create a unique name, you know, out of a combination of family first or last name. I mean, if you go check out Kanye West's children's names, I mean, you'll be shocked. Isn't there one called West? Is it North? Yeah, North or West or Northwest. So people also get creative when they're naming their children. So what do you consider before naming your child? And how do you deal with people who want to name your child? Like, imagine your mother comes and says, I also want to give a name. Your father, and then your mother-in-law, your father-in-law. Like, how do we limit it? How do we limit that process where priority is it's us as the parents who are going to name the child? Or maybe you come from a background, right? You come from a background, a family where, you know, you as the mother and the father, it's not your responsibility to actually name your children. You've got to give that responsibility to the grandmother or to the grandfather. How does it work? Let's share our experiences on 011-883-0702. The WhatsApp line is 072-702-1702. I mean, there's names like Chicago, like Sam, like Saint. I told you about North, Kanye West's child. There are many other names where parents are just being creative. But one thing I have sort of seen in life is that literally the meaning of your name almost follows you and you become part of it. Like when you are Matsidiso, when you are Thabo, when you are Tabisang, like there's something we're able to pick up in your personality, right, that we can link to the meaning of your name. So, how do you name your children? How were you named? 011-883-0702. The WhatsApp line is 072-702-1702. Lelia Schott is a parenting coach who's going to be guiding us through this discussion. I'll also bring in Gogo Dineo Ndlanzi, who is an African spiritual teacher and healer later on, to also give us her perspectives around the issue of naming children. Lelia, thank you so much for making time. Good morning.
Good morning, Clement. It's so good to be here.
When parents are deciding on how to name and what to name their children, what are normally the considerations? And when should parents start deciding on the name of the child? Should it be during the pregnancy or after the child is born?
I know that it will be unique depending on people's religion, race, ethnicity, etc. So I can only speak to what I know, but I think that mothers typically start, and fathers, bonding with their baby when it's still in utero, right? Like imagining who is this unique person going to be? What do we want them to be? What values do we want them to uphold? And imagine what they're going to name a child before they've even conceived the child, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, Lelia, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, I can. I thought we were losing you there. Yeah, just continue, please.
So I think we have a connection, a bond with the baby that we're carrying, typically, not always, but typically we do. And it's through this process that parents would start to imagine what they want to name their child based on how they imagine that child's life unfolding or who they imagine that child will be. So typically based on either a sense of belonging, right? Belonging to this lineage, to this family, or some people prioritize authenticity, like wanting their child to be unique and stand out. So either I typically see parents choosing something where the child will fit in, or some people want their child to stand out, and that often influences how they name their child.
Mm-hmm. So some parents, I often see that when they name their child, they want to describe either the difficulty or the smooth process with which they carried, that particular child. But sometimes there are conflicts where, the father wants to give the name, the mother wants to give the name, then the grandparents want to be involved as well. How, in your experience, from what you've seen, how have parents navigated this, where they want to be the ones that give the name, but sometimes there are all these different other family members who want to have a say? I know that Will Smith, for instance, I read his book, and in the book he talks about how they were naming, they gave their older children an opportunity to name their younger children. So when there's the baby on the way, they go to the older siblings and they say, okay, there's a baby on the way. What would you want us to name them? So the process can be so encompassing and bring in so many people, but then you're going to end up with like 6,000 names. So how do parents navigate, that environment where it's not just them who want to name the child?
Mm-hmm. And this can cause so much conflict, right? We do see this. We see mothers really struggling because you have a need to please your in-laws, your parents, your oldest children, but also I believe, I want to be respectful of all the different traditions that we have as humans, but I believe it really should be up to the parents ultimately, right? It's so cool to include older siblings and to honor our parents and everybody who's going to love this child. But ultimately, it needs to be the parents who decide, because this is their opportunity to name a child according to their heart, what feels right for them.
Yeah. I'm going to take a quick ad break. When we come back, I'll take some more calls. I want you to share your experiences with us, right? How do you decide when you're naming your child? Is it a decision you make before pregnancy, during pregnancy, after pregnancy, and you've seen this little human being and you decide what you're going to name them? And how extensive is your involvement of other parties, right? Do you involve your grandparents? Do you talk to your friends? I've been consulted before by a friend who was about to name their child. Will Smith will contact, will bring in and involve his older children and say, there's a new one coming. What do you want to name them? And then you've got grandparents who also want to be involved. And then you're going to end up like Clement, who's got 3 names, because everybody wanted to have a say as to what name he takes up. So how do you navigate that environment? 011-883-0702. I'll take your WhatsApps as well on 072-702-1702 after this.
Growing the economy and creating jobs through localization. The Clement Manyatela Show on 702 is coming to you live from the Buy Local Summit and Expo, Sandton Convention Center.
It's 20 minutes after 11 o'clock. It's our Family Matters feature, and we are discussing naming children, right? What do you consider before giving your child a name? Benny, you're calling from Braamfontein. Good morning.
Morning, Clement. My son's name is Vikarabelo, and the reason why the name Vikarabelo, the name was given by his grandfather from the mother's side on the basis that the mother went to varsity, and it is only after she came back from varsity that she became pregnant and he was born. And my second one is Matlogonolo or Arabile. We wanted the girl child. So on the basis that God has answered, then I decided Arabile will be, the correct name. The name is very, very important when it comes to a child. I remember growing up in the Denbu Botswana, there was this guy who was named Mudidi, and the guy was so poor, he even died poor.
And Mudidi means poverty. Yeah.
Yes, it means poverty. And that guy, and he was so poor in everything that he was doing. So I've taken the decision that I will not even going to name my kids with the grandmother saying, with whoever, they have to start from scratch. Because one other thing, in Setswana they say, I don't know how can I put it in English, Lina Leaborelong. If he was poor, like this guy that I'm saying he was poor, then he will end up poor.
All right, Benny, sorry, on Buikarabelo. So Buikarabelo is what? Is it responsibility?
It's responsible.
What
the
is
mother
it?
Was responsible. The mother was
responsible.
Yes, she went to varsity. She didn't disappoint the parents, and she came back. It's only when she was working after varsity that she became pregnant with our first son.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Benny, thank you, man. Thank you for calling. Let's hear what the other listeners think. Is it Sagren in Randburg? Good morning.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm all right, man. Go ahead.
Thank you for taking my call. Look, my first choice on one of my sons was the name Judas. And I had a huge rebellion from the family. So
Judas?
Judas.
Sagren. Okay, please explain.
I really wanted to name him Judas, and there was such an uprising. So I'll tell you what I did. I chose something like about 30 to 35 names, and I sent that list to every single member of our family, every single member, and I asked them to choose the top 3. And what I did, it was like a voting system. And what I did, but every single member of the family. And then what I did was the first choice and the first and second, I took them and I named my children. And what I've found is that, remember, it's getting every single family member involved in the naming of a child. And as I said, it worked. And now we've got Andrew Daniel, and we've also got Ethan Caleb. But as I said, my first choice was Judas. But,
why though? Why Judas? What, were you betrayed? Who betrayed you, Sagren? Imagine the poor child. Wow, Sagren. Thank you for calling. Philip in Highlands North. Hi.
Hi. Yeah, when my son is now 28, and when he was born, my wife and I couldn't decide on a name. She liked the name Benjamin, I liked the name Matthew. So we took a whole lot of pieces of paper and we put it into a hat, and we got one of the nursing sisters to pull out the name. Since then, he hasn't forgiven us, and he's now decided he's going to call himself. He's going to call himself Mitchell, because he says we couldn't even decide on what to call him.
What a funny story. Wow, the poor nurse at the hospital now who's got to decide the fate of this little one. Bakang in Centurion, what's your story? Hi.
Hi, Clement. I hope you're well. For me, I have only one child. It's a little boy. But for me, what we decided, my husband decided on the name actually before I even got pregnant. It was like, we have a baby. It's going to be Katleho, boy or girl. So I just accepted it. And for his middle name, the maternal grandparents got to name him. I guess my only thing is with me and names is it has to be like a Tswana name. Me and Habi are both Tswana. And then more towards a Christian name. But I was happy with Katahoni's success. And I think he's living up to his name so far. He's only 6 years old. But I always told my husband, I'm like, our second baby, I get to name. So the first name will definitely come from me, and then hopefully the middle name can come from the paternal side of the family. But for me, with our family, how we decided mostly has to be a Christian name, like my name, and like strictly Tswana. We say no English names for us. So that's how we decided on our part.
Oh, so you guys still give them Christian names?
Yes, I'm a firm believer in Christian names, and I always say, because our parents have these English names, I believe it's like, slave names, but I'm like, you know what, I want to name them first, middle name, and your first name has to be in our home language. So for us,
which character from the Bible do you choose, though? Do you choose Magdalena? Do you choose Joshua?
For me, I wouldn't, not according to like prophets or anything, but it would definitely, like, my name Bakang means praise. And then my middle name is Molebogeng. So my name was taken from a church that meant praise. So for me, it'll be like Olebogeng. That's what, for me, when I say Christian names, that's what I mean. So there's a meaning behind it. Either we're thanking God or it's praise. Like on my side, like my husband's name is Thabo. So then it's mostly that, not so much based on Joshua and
I hear you. Say hi to Thabo. Because my first name is Thabo.
Your sister's name?
My first name is also Thabo. Yeah, my first name. Thabo Tando Clement. And the listeners have given me Madimeja, which, by the way, I'm going to be adding on my ID very soon. Lelia, let's talk now about the tension that arises. How do you say to your in-laws or your grandparents or even your own parents that we appreciate you, we know that you want to be involved in naming the child, but we've decided this is a responsibility we are going to take up as parents? I mean, that can be really tough, especially for parents or great parents who are used to the system of being involved in the naming of the child.
Yes. Oh, yes. And of course, we want to please our parents, right? We don't want to cause conflict. But I do think it's such a brave and courageous thing to do. In our generation, there's more awareness that it is the parents' responsibility, right? It takes a village, of course. But there are some things that are really sacred to the parents, and one of them is naming their child. Of course, if you're happy to have your whole family included and that feels good and true to you, then great. But if a mom or a dad really dislike a name that the family come up with, or they have a particular name that they feel is what they want to name their child, then it's really brave to say, as you just said, so respectfully, we know that you want to be a part of this. Of course, we understand that. And this is the name we've chosen, right? And that is tough to do, but I think it's important so that we can change things up a little bit and have more autonomy over how we decide to raise our children. Lelia Schott, parenting coach, thank you so much for making time for us here.
The Clement Manyatela Show on 702, live at the Sandton Convention Center with Proudly South African. Learn more about how buying local can positively impact job creation in our economy.
All right, let's continue our conversation on our Family Matters feature this morning. We're discussing naming children. I will be bringing on Gogo, Dineo, and Ndlanzi in a short while. Let me just play a few of your WhatsApp messages, also some of the text messages that have come through before we get to that conversation. Hi, Clement. My ex-wife and I named ours. Abel, I think I need glasses. Hey, my ex-wife and I named ours. No parents involved at all. Their names mean praise. Tumisho, Aubakwe, and Rorisang. And then another message says, Clement, my daughter's name is Uratilwe Kimudimu. I decided on the name because the father was not involved in the pregnancy. He just was absent, and I just wanted her to know that she is loved by a greater Father, which is God. Ooh, I love that. I love that. Another message says, oh, by the way, my niece's name also is Oratilwe. Another message says, hi, Clement. My son wants us to name our daughter, who is coming in May, Orange Juice. My husband is a last-minute guy and hasn't applied his mind. At this rate, I'm going to make an executive decision. Our kids will have 3 names. I'm Tswana. He's from the Netherlands, where most names sound Afrikaans, which is tricky in South Africa with our history. And we want to also have a neutral name. My son's neutral name is Ghanaian. Where's that? We leave family. Oh, we are leaving our family out because of politics. I would have loved to give my kids Setswana names from our grandparents, etc. But they had names that are quite sad, and I am ambitious, and I'm about giving names that are positive. Back then, folks were okay to name their kids Matlakala, Simakaleng, or names that can be explained. Yo, yeah. Wow, imagine your child wants you to name their sibling Orange Juice. Yeah, Will Smith and his wife went to their older child. In fact, I think it was Will Smith's son from the first marriage. And they said, yo, you got a brother coming up, or was it a sister? Was it Jaden who came first? But they were like, you've got a brother or sister coming. What do you want us to name them? And that boy had a name that Will Smith was like, what? I'm not naming my child that. But they had to find a way to work around it. So, that's really what happens. Okay, here's a WhatsApp voice note that's also came through.
Yo, Clem, great show. Maybe Sagrin was betrayed by birth control. Hence, Judas, he must actually come clean and tell us where the betrayal happened.
That's a valid question. So we're going to call Elia from Sagrin, who says he wanted to name his child Judas. What? Who betrayed you, Sagrin? And Tato is suggesting here that you were betrayed by the birth control. Okay, let's bring in Gogo Dineo Ndlanzi now, who is an African spiritual teacher, healer, and Reverend. Gogo Dineo, thank you for making time. Good morning.
Thank you, Clement, for having me. Good morning to you too.
Do you think we understand how significant that process is of naming children, and how much thought and consideration do we need to give to that process, so that it's not just I like this name, it sounds sexy and cool, or this is the name of my favorite celebrity, so let's just give it to the child?
Yeah, no, I think some of us do know, and some of us, name because there's a name that needs to be given to a child. So, that child can be identified. But when we used to name, it was a process altogether. It wasn't, I wake up, I just discuss with my husband, then we name. Everything would play a role into the naming of a child, because we understood that actually we are calling forward a soul's mission through a name. So if we're giving you a name, we are activating why you have incarnated on earth. So that's why there was a lot of consideration. So we'd consider the circumstances of conception, what happened during the pregnancy, and also during the birth of the child, and not only to the parents, but to also the community and the society, because that child was then seen as a gift that is coming to age and add value to the community in which it was born into. Because, we have a proverb that says it takes a village to raise a child. But right now it takes, one parent, so it takes 2 people. It's not as it used to be. So the naming process then relies on the primary caregiver, whereas before it was a collective, process where we understood that we are actually activating somebody's soul's mission here. So we need to be considerate when we're naming that child.
So should we, there are some people, Gogo Dineo, who feel that so they'll be followed by bad luck if they don't name the child after the grandmother, or they don't take the suggestion of the grandmother or even the mother to say this is what this child's name should be. Is that a thing, or can parents, as long as they are satisfied that they've given a name that somehow reflects the journey of the pregnancy, that reflects the kind of life they're wishing on the child. Is that sufficient, or is there an obligation to always consider the suggestion from the elders?
Well, the beauty of now, I have my last born child is 4 names. Because at the last minute, my dad was praying in the river, and the name came, and we've already decided on the 3 names, as you know, both me and my husband and both sides of the family. So I think that putting pressure on parents about they must take a name, because you don't just take a name. Traditionally, you don't just take a name. Because the reason you do a ritual to actually ask for that name is so that you are not taking everything of the person who carries the name, because some people have that trait and you want to name them. So, then you are naming them, and remember, you're calling forward a soul's mission. So that soul is connected to the soul that has passed away, and they really didn't live a palatable life. So what are you imposing on your child? So sometimes I feel as a way of us, getting through and going through mourning processes or dealing with a loss, we want to burden the newborn with the name of somebody who will clearly know that their life was not really palatable. So if we're going to do that, then there has to be a ritual, because some children will be troubled as if they've got, a spiritual calling to become a healer, but it's because they took upon a name that has burdens and curses on it.
I see. So is it also fine to name your children after yourself? I mean, it happens where there must be a Clement Jr. And then should I ask myself first as Clement, would I want my child to live, and have the influences of the life I have lived first before I start naming them after us as the parents?
But if you look at when did we start having juniors, is when we had a lot of American TV influences. So we rather, the issue of surnames is actually our forefathers' name. So Mesitum Ziligazi Gamashobani, it means Gutum Ziligazi Gamashobani, right? So it wasn't the, Clement Jr., Tipo Jr., that actually came with a lot of Western influences on us. But culture does evolve, because we don't become the same people. Our environment then and our environment now also has shifted and has changed. But I'm just saying that let's be very considerate, because we are calling forward somebody here. Every time you are named, we are actually validating something in that child. So the consideration of a name, and that's why it's also very important to sit down with the elders, not because they're there to dictate, but to say we were thinking of, like again, my son, as I'm talking, I dreamt of the name, and I spoke to my husband about it, and we engaged my mother about it, because how he came.
Yeah. Oh, Gogo, Dineo, we're losing you.
Are you losing me?
Oh, sorry. We were losing you a little bit there, but I think we got the point you were making. What about names that do not necessarily have meaning? I mean, Kanye West, Gogo Dineo, they're naming their kids North.
No wonder there's so much madness.
West.
No wonder there's so much madness in the West, right? I mean, if you look at people who sometimes it feels like their name has nothing, they somewhat self-sabotage. I mean, there's a lot of other things that are contributing factors, but names are very powerful to us, and they're very important to us, and that's why I say be very considerate. And sometimes names that look like, oh my God, how would you name your child Matlakala? It's because children would not make it to full term. So we needed a name that will actually, break that curse in the family. So by naming them as such a name, but give them a middle name. And also allow your children to in the future, to consider taking a name that really resonates and speaks to them. My first name is Maria. And then I went to Dineo, which is actually my third name. And I said, well, Dineo means actually, a gift to the nation. And it means Maria as well, and it means Christina as well. So my parents were very supportive, and I asked to be called Dineo, and look what Dineo brought me. It brought me Gogo Dineo, the spiritual teacher and healer. So we need to be to be attached as parents as well as we name our children. My second born first name is Sabelo, but she's now transitioning, and she's decided to go into, she's gender transitioning, because for her Sabelo has got a strong, gender association to it. And then she went to her second name, which is Tiamo, and Tiamo is a gender neutral name. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Oh, Nole Magdalena, Nole Maria Magdalena. Thank you for me. Mama Jess. Okay, Gogo Dineo Ndlanzi, African spiritual teacher, healer, and Reverend. Thank you for making time for us. It's 10 minutes before 12.
Your voice.
Your questions.
Your morning radio with Clement Maniatella.
This is 702.
All right, 8 minutes now before 12 o'clock. I will be bringing in a short while some of the local businesses that are showcasing here at the Buy Local Summit and Expo. I just want to wrap up this conversation with a few of the messages that have come through around naming children. Stephanie says, hi Clement, we named our kids Ndlanzi, our son, which symbolizes the unending love, the care, the kindness, and the grace. You can't see where it starts or ends. Also symbolizes our love, which is endless. That's beautiful. And then he says, our second child, Tembelihle, she is our beautiful hope, the one who will show us what we haven't seen. That's beautiful. I think I'm gonna steal that. Tembelihle. That sounds beautiful, and I love the meaning behind that. And then there's another message here from someone says, Clement, my name is Keromo Dichwe. I was born just after my grandfather's death. I was given the name by my mom, who had just lost her dad. So again, that is reflecting on what was happening at the time of the pregnancy. All right, thank you so much for your messages. I think you've also given us some suggestions on what we can name our kids. Buitoko on Twitter, by the way, says, Clement, I named our first girl Asante. Thank you. We named her 5 weeks while pregnant because we knew the sex 10 years before our marriage. We wanted to thank God for keeping his word. Our boy Amani, which means peace, we chose Swahili. We wanted the names that will not be bullied and also glorify God. Well, thank you very much for sharing that with us.